test out this mic. Let's see how that goes. Oh, is there an echo in here? Maybe not.
Yeah, there we go.
Echo? Yeah, still a little? All right, this is better. I speak a little quietly normally, so I'm going to try to use the mic for those in the back and everyone. So hi, I'm Wylie Conlon. I have been thinking about this question for a little while since I was volunteering with Code Nation, formerly ScriptEd, for about a year in the classroom, and then on the curriculum team, and then now I contribute to the PopCode code editor, which is like a custom code editor that we use in the curriculum. And so one of the things that we keep asking is like, okay, what is this tool that we're building supposed to do, and what should it do next, and how do we get there? And then more broadly, I've been thinking about it, just what is the future of these code editing tools going to look like? There's a lot of interesting trends, and I'm going to try to talk about that, but I've cut a ton of information from this because there's just way too much to cover. So hopefully I get the key points. A lot of this work I did at the Recurse Center last fall. Highly recommend it, apply. But this is not about my work necessarily, it's about other people's work who are much more expert than I am. Cool, so an integrated development environment. This is an IDE. You are probably thinking of Visual Studio Code. Everyone does these days because it is a great tool. It is built by embedding a browser. It's embedding the Chromium web browser in it, and so everything you're seeing here is actually rendering HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just like you'd expect. So in some sense, the browser of the of today is already, the IDE of today is already embedding a browser. So that's maybe backwards from what I was asking originally, but I just thought it was really interesting. Like, look at this crazy graph that I grabbed all the data from the last 3 years and graphed it here, and like, that's pretty crazy. So developers are willing to switch to tools if the tools give you what you're looking for, which apparently is autocomplete. And so I wanted to compare this to what we think of today when we think of tools that are running in the web browser with a URL. So JS Fiddle is the classic example. It's got HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is just like PopCode, and you write your code, there's no files, and you just get a live preview. And this is great for web developers, but I think we can do more than this. So the browser is the default platform to today. We already see that Visual Studio Code is built by embedding a browser. You can build powerful tools with browser technology. That's not the issue. The issue is that we've started with text files, and we've added all the other stuff that you do when you're working on a project, and this stuff is all over the place, but this is what you do when you're actually working on software. You do everything. And so I wanted to talk about doing everything and talking about the browser and the web, and like, this is a little semantic. I wasn't sure if I was going to include this, but does the IDE of the future have a URL? Can you link to it? And if so, what does that do? What does that do differently from a downloadable app? And that's one of the things that I think I want to talk about today is everything you do except writing code has a URL. But they don't just have a URL. You can't just do it from the browser. You do it from the browser and an app, and it's shareable, and it's integrated with everything else. There's a bunch of companies that build these kinds of tools. We've got Atlassian, we've got JetBrains, we've got Amazon. They all have their own ecosystems of tools that talk to each other, but they don't talk to necessarily what you do. If I'm doing issue tracking my way, I can't necessarily talk to whatever tool in whatever environment I have set up because they're trying to lock you in. And so the promise of the web in some ways is similar to the promise of like Linux systems, which is you can have any number of clients, 25 clients for Git with GUIs on the Mac. Like any number of clients, any number of sources, and they all talk to each other. If you're using Git, you can use GitHub with the web API, website, you can use a desktop client, terminal, plug in your IDE, but you can do the same with Bitbucket or whatever other Git server you have. Why isn't every part of coding and every part of the software development flow like this? Why do I have to use CircleCI or Jenkins or Travis or whatever? It's the same ideas, but the lock-in is there. So, developer environments, should catch up. They should also be in the browser. I think that's probably given where we are today. Like most of the new tools are being done by default, but yeah, it's time for them to catch up and to go further than what's possible today because of this browser technology. I don't think we're taking advantage yet. So to take a step back, where are we today? We are in sort of the older generation, I think. All of these browser IDEs are using a set of common text editors with syntax highlighting. There's 4 of them, which I was really surprised when I found out that there were 4. There's the ACE editor created by Cloud9, first released in 2013. That was acquired by Amazon. CodeMirror is basically the only independent one at this point, and it's embedded in the Chrome developer tools and Firefox developer tools, and it's a small, extensible IDE. But they had a funding crisis. They're still being developed, but it's independent. Monaco was created independently in 2013 for Visual Studio Code, or Visual Studio Online, and is now part of VSCode. I just think it's interesting that the tool that most of us use today is started on a website and is now in your desktop. And then Atom is a separate one. It's mostly desktop oriented, but it has some interesting ideas I want to talk about. So Cloud9 looks like this. This is Cloud9 editing a Lambda function with debugging support. It also works in EC2. So Cloud9 is like sort of the original container-based tool. It has a server which has your files, and you edit on it in a client in your browser. We've got REPL-it, which you have templates, REPLs, which have any number of language support, and you can run Clojure or whatever with a REPL. You can run any language you want pretty much, but there's no debugger or anything else. Like this is great for getting something running quickly, but like, yeah, where's the debugger? Where's the test suite? Like, I just think it's crazy that stuff's missing. Jupyter Notebooks, I think, is a great example of a browser native tool. This is taking the best parts of the web, which is like combining text and the ability to interact, and doing it for data science, and obviously super popular. We have things like Scratch, which is a totally different way of writing JavaScript. That's a simplistic way of describing it, but I'm going to leave it there. And then we have things like Swift Playgrounds, which I think is really cool because this is a touch-oriented thing. It's using touch-native controls. Brett Victor had a lot of influence in building this kind of UI for touch devices, and I really want to show the keyboard on this because the keyboard is great. It has keyboard support for autocomplete, unlike something like a mobile app. This is mobile web. There's no real mobile app for this. Like, look at this keyboard. There's nothing here where Coda for iOS, for example, has at least some of the HTML-specific characters on the keyboard. So browsers are already closing the gap with native apps in all sorts of ways. I'm not going to go into these, but these are all exciting things that are happening on their own with just like browser technology, and I wanted to mention them. But more specifically, what is the promise here? Why can we do more than like what we have today? And I think the promise of all these tools is that we can write software on any device. We can do collaborative editing without internet connections. We can have tools that are smarter, that make you smarter by actually looking at the code and doing machine learning or pattern detection or whatever. I've been reading some interesting papers about automated templates for fixing bugs with machine learning. That's an interesting research area right now. But environments defined in code. Everything else is defined in code. Why is your editor not? And then we do a lot of complex work. It should be more manageable in your editor. So I was trying to figure out a way of putting this idea into simple terms, and I found this article in a magazine called The Architecture for the Next Generation of Developer Tools, and these are the points that they were making in this architecture. It was like a design doc. So the points, and I agree with all of these are great points. The IDE of the next generation of developer tools should be integrated. We should take whatever tasks you want to do and just make them all available from one interface. But we want to use existing tools. This is the Linux philosophy of having tools that do one thing really well that you can then integrate. We want to support teams. Work gets done in teams, we should support it. We should support distributed computing from whatever kind of computers and servers you have and whatever location they are. We need to support interchangeable tools, which they go into more detail on, multiple work styles, different tools for different people on the team, for example. If I'm doing prototyping or documentation writing, I might not want the same tool. And then other kinds of lifecycle stuff. This is like product management, project management, design. And then HP Softbench is the thing I'm talking about. We should support ARPA networking, which you might not be familiar with, but this was written in June 1990. This was the first ever IDE that had plugin support, and it was written in June 1990. This tool was never super popular. It had its own lock-in problems, but like, I just really like the idea that building for a distributed computing model was the default then. And I will take another minute or two. So they did a really interesting way of analyzing this distributed stuff, and I want to talk about where we are today. CodeMirror is going mobile. Adam has been doing some experiments in building a server-oriented with many clients and collaboration built in. This is probably never going to see the light of day, but it's a really interesting architecture. And then we have things like the language server protocol, which makes any editor talk to any tool. That's how Visual Studio Code works. Eclipse Shea is one of the most interesting projects I've seen. They build editors as extensions to your Kubernetes cluster, and so the entire thing is plugin oriented by default. This is already being used by some really big companies. DevFile is a project they have, which is developer environments as code. You can have a link to create a workspace on demand from whatever tool you have. It's just a link, but you have an entire working developer environment, and you're not locked into using it in the browser. It can work. Your link can create an environment which you then talk to using regular file system stuff, so you can talk to it from whatever tool you have. So I came up with this whole grid. This was my analysis of these tools. I know a lot of you here are from Glitch. You've got some work to do. And so the next generation of developer tools, these are written almost 30 years ago. It's still true. And how are we going to get there? We are going to build more composable tools because our work is getting more complex. We have a universal platform in the browser, and we can build these protocols because we should and we have to. And we've already seen with the rise of Visual Studio Code in the last 3 years or so that developers are willing to switch if the benefits are there. And I think that in the next few years, the benefits will be very clear. And these tools I highlighted are a good example. And I wanted to just recommend, I think Replit is a really good tool as it is today. And Eclipse Shea is a really promising tool for actual team-based workspaces that are for the future. Thank you.